Through Marvel America, I'm on a mission to blend real history with the excitement of the Marvel Universe, using these stories to inspire and educate both myself and you. Before I dive into my first podcast episode, I want to share a little bit about why I'm doing this podcast. You see, growing up, I was totally disengaged from school. I would much rather read a comic book than a history book. History felt like a series of dull dates and events that seemed totally disconnected from my life. And I never found the classroom discussions engaging or relevant. And of course, I carried many blind spots into adulthood because of this lack of interest and understanding. Well, today, I've realized just how important it is to know where we actually come from, to understand where we're headed. I've been ferociously learning about history, uncovering the events and decisions that shaped our world. It's not just about trivia or dusty textbooks. It's about gaining the context to make better, more informed decisions. Decisions that can help make this country even greater than it is. And I want to be a part of it. Because I believe that, like our greatest heroes, we all have the potential to become better, to make a difference, and to leave a lasting impact. Not just watching our heroes on the big screen or reading about them in comic books, but actually becoming the superhero ourselves. Each week, what we're going to do, is explore a real-life event or historical figure that shaped America. And we're going to draw parallels with the Marvel Universe, discovering lessons to live by. Today, we're diving into two icons of American resilience. We got George Washington and Marvel's Captain America. Let's rewind to 1776. This is a time when the American colonies were fighting for survival against the British Empire. George Washington emerges as this steadfast leader. He embodied resilience and honor. Don't get me wrong, he got his butt whipped on several occasions, and after multiple defeats, he leads a surprise attack on Christmas night of all nights, crossing the icy Delaware River and turning the tide of the war. This Christmas, think about George Washington and 2,400 Continental soldiers crossing the frigid river under brutal conditions. They're battling freezing winds and ice. They arrive in Trenton early on December 26th, and they catch the Haitians off guard. Haitians were mercenaries working for the British Empire. And George Washington and his troops captured 900 of these soldiers with minimal casualties of their own. It was more than a tactical win. It transformed morale and revived the revolutionary cause. Prior to this, soldiers were getting discouraged. They were freezing to death, suffering from disease. The government wasn't able to fund more weapons for the cause. The success boosted public support and encouraged re-enlistments. A week later, Washington secures another win at Princeton, New Jersey, proving the Continental Army's strength and inspiring resilience across the colonies. When I think about what Washington did on Christmas, I think about me, lounging around in a warm home, surrounded by gifts, plenty of food, and festive decorations. It's easy for me, and probably many of you, to overlook the freedoms we take for granted. The ability to celebrate in safety and abundance. It's a privilege that many who fought for our independence never knew. When I think of George Washington and resilience, I look at myself and ask, am I resilient? I've grown up in a world that's driven by consumerism and convenience. It's easy to become complacent and just live on fast food, packaged goods, and become kind of lethargic and just sleepwalk my way through life. But now, as I'm learning about history and being inspired by it, I try to make myself a better person and ask, what's going to make me more driven, motivated to make real change? So little by little, I've incorporated changes in my life. I eat strictly real whole foods. no packaged stuff. I compost and recycle, and I even grow my own produce in my backyard as much as I can. I mean, these are small acts that I'm hoping will add up and strengthen me. I feel it is, actually. Resilience needs leadership too. Leadership that unites and inspires. That's why I'm making this podcast. That's why I make YouTube videos on healthy living and creativity. We all need to be creative in this world. We're bombarded by information. It's what we do with the information that defines us. For me, the steps I'm taking now are hopefully leading to something much more grand along my journey. I envision building a homestead and being self-sustained for my family, and then expanding my reach to the community. I want my community to be able to come to my homestead, not only enjoy the fruits of my labor with fresh fruits and vegetables and meats for my livestock, but I envision a whole outdoor recreational area with weights, obstacle courses, ropes to climb, and rings to swing on, an outdoor temple to work on mind, body, and spirit, like a superhero will, to become the best version of their selves. What does resilience look like to you? What steps are you going to take to become a stronger, better version of yourself? Are you going to start eating right? Exercising? Maybe you're going to go to school, get skills necessary to work in tech, become a teacher, start your own business. Maybe you're going to get into politics or the military. The sky's the limit, but work on becoming your own version of a superhero. And speaking of superheroes, let's talk about Captain America. Let's flash forward now to Marvel's World War II. It coincides with our own World War II. That started in 1939 when Germany and Hitler invade Poland. It ends in 1945 with Japan's surrender after a couple atomic bombs are dropped. It's during this time that Steve Rogers is transformed into Captain America. He becomes a beacon of courage during a dark time. Like Washington, Rogers is an ordinary person called to an extraordinary mission, who fights to protect liberty, even when it's difficult or unpopular. Embodying Captain America's values, for me, is about living each day with purpose, courage, and commitment. Every choice I make, how I treat others, how I work, and how I contribute, reflects those values. Now, George Washington and Captain America have their flaws, like every being on this planet. George Washington, for example. As a young guy, Washington was of course ambitious, and he's determined to rise socially. He was a surveyor, and he sometimes exaggerated his connections and inflated his land holdings, believing it would help him secure future opportunities. But over time, Washington learns that true respect comes from integrity, not shortcuts. I get this. Throughout high school, I would always start out every semester on top of it, but then I'd inevitably get overwhelmed by the workload, and I'd start cutting corners, copying homework, even cheating on tests to get the grades my parents expected. But when I got to college, I was totally unprepared. I hadn't built that foundation because I cut corners. I had no critical thinking skills. Heck, I couldn't tell you what came first, Vietnam or World War II. And in college, I remember joining discussion groups and feeling so inept when everyone's going back and forth with their opinions and drawing from historical facts and events. I had nothing to contribute. I was thinking about what movie I'm going to see on the weekend, what new comics are coming out this week. Although I did not cheat my way through college, I might as well have. I memorized my way through college. And when I got my UCLA diploma, it felt empty, like I hadn't earned it. Like Washington, I learned that respect doesn't come from cutting corners. It comes from integrity, doing the work, and committing to growth and service. Thank goodness I have acquired over time a love of learning, but it didn't come in an education system where the subjects and the timetables are dictated to you. It's very tough, and I don't have an answer yet. But hopefully, as we develop more leaders who look to past leaders for inspiration, we're going to come up with a more innovative way to teach our youth. Despite Washington's greatness, as he advocated for freedom from the British rule, there's a dark part of his legacy. He owned slaves and even devised methods to avoid freeing them. While he eventually freed his slaves in his will, these actions contradict the ideals of liberty he fought for. I cannot imagine being in a situation as George was, being raised in a society where slaves were just the norm. I grew up watching movies where heroes were almost always white men. Women were frequently objectified, and they were most often two-dimensional characters there to serve the men. Women could not be stand-up comics. Only men were funny. Oddly enough, comic books helped me overcome those stereotypes because, as you and I well know, in comics, there are some awesome female heroes, strong, independent, inspirational. In my upbringing, I was raised in a neighborhood that was very whitewashed. The only minorities I knew personally at my school were from lower socioeconomic areas, and they were often not the smartest kids in the class. So I gained this narrow view of a minority. Thank goodness, through life experience and a solid foundation at home, and moving around, going to college, engaging in open dialogues, and taking on different jobs in different socioeconomic neighborhoods, they've all contributed to help me grow beyond the limitations of my upbringing. I remember this one Captain America's storyline. Cap loses faith in the government's integrity. So what does he do? He gives up his mantle and becomes just the captain. Now, this decision leaves a void, and the new captain, John Walker, becomes a violent and unstable symbol. I think about it now, and this story shows that even a hero's best intentions can lead to unintended harm when ideals are prioritized over practical reality. I think about that story now, and I think about myself as a teacher. For a few years, I loved inspiring students, but I became discouraged by a flawed system. And eventually, what did I do? I left, hoping to make a greater impact elsewhere. But I can't help wondering if, by leaving, I joined the line of well-intentioned teachers abandoning the system. Was I supposed to fix the system? Stay in it? Endure? I wrestle with whether I should have stayed, or if I should continue building something better, like a homestead where young people can connect with the land and learn real-world skills. Is this something that's going to be reality, or is it a pipe dream? Like Steve Rogers, I'm torn between staying in a flawed system or stepping outside to create change from the ground up. I'm choosing the latter, hoping this path will positively impact future generations. I'm hoping this podcast serves to do that same thing. I look at the parallels in lessons for today that both Washington and Captain America can teach us. Both of them rallied others to believe in something greater. Washington shaped a nation, and Cap inspired generations to think about patriotism as grounded in sacrifice and empathy. They're celebrated not for their power, but for the choices they made to serve, sacrifice, and stand firm in their beliefs. The question for me, for us, is what can we learn that goes beyond admiration, beyond just reading about these guys in the pages of a comic book or watching them on screen? Can we actually embody their resilience and willingness to lead by example? I came up with a list of things I could potentially do, just to do my part in practicing patriotism. Maybe you can do one of these as well. Volunteer locally. I don't know, supporting shelters, food banks, community centers. Support veterans. Connect with local veteran organizations or write thank you notes. Simple things. Don't try to do everything all at once. Engage in civic duties. Vote, for crying out loud. Keep staying informed and participate in your community. What does that look like to you? Are you practicing sustainability? I mentioned I'm recycling. I can probably do a better job at conserving water. And I love composting. That I know is protecting my environment. I try to buy local at my farmer's market down the street. Do you show kindness? Help neighbors or those in need? And are you patient and understanding? Or are you just in go, go, go mode and you put blinders on and don't even see the people around you? I've been there. What about being a mentor, a coach, a tutor? How can you expose yourself to different cultures and gain an understanding of where they come from? We're so divided as a nation now. And monitor your social media. Be cognizant of the fact that there are algorithms that constantly push stuff in front of you that aligns with your current mindset. So it strengthens your current position, probably makes you feel good about what you believe in, but it constantly beats down any who oppose or hold different views than you do. And that can lead to further polarization and cut off the dialogue that we so desperately need. Now, George Washington and Captain America may come from different worlds, but the qualities that make them inspiring are, of course, universal. What small ways can you bring the spirit of a true hero into your own life? Whether it's kindness, standing up for what's right, or striving to be better, remember that you can inspire change like a superhero, like a historical figure who's honorable. America often gets accused of living in their own bubble, not being aware of what's going on in the rest of the world. I fully admit I am guilty of this. So we're going to try to burst that American bubble. We're going to do this each episode. So let's take one particular event for this episode that was going on elsewhere while George Washington was fighting alongside the other colonists against the British Empire. Let's go across the pond to Europe and visit Germany, which was not actually unified, but a collection of states, and they were under the loose authority of the Holy Roman Empire. And these states were culturally and politically very diverse, and of course this led to ongoing conflicts. Perhaps you've heard of the War of the Austrian Succession, the 7 Years' War. Now these events played a significant role in shaping the region. Also, during this cultural and political unrest, there was something amazing going on. The age of classical music. So think about this. When George Washington and the colonists are battling for independence, this era in Europe saw the rise of legendary composers like Johann Sebastian Bach, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Ludwig van Beethoven. Perhaps you've heard of them. Music was flourishing. Symphonies, operas, orchestras. So it wasn't all about war during this time. To give you a better visual sense of what life was like when George Washington was fighting for our country, let's talk about pop culture. And you can't talk about pop culture without talking about music, dance. Folk music was big back then. Patriotic songs were popular. Yankee Doodle Dandy became the anthem for the American troops. Of course, dancing was a favored social activity with styles like minuets, reels, and country dances. Have no idea what I'm talking about? Minuets. These were elegant, informal dances. You more often see these at elite events. Reels, on the other hand, they were fast and lively. They brought communities together and they were very energetic. Then there's the country dances. This is kind of a middle ground. They're structured but less formal than the minuets. This fostered social interaction and community spirit. And when you hit the town, what did you do? You went to a tavern or a coffee house. And of course, during the war, these were hubs for political discussion and socializing and planning, a place where people rallied to support the move for independence. Let's flash forward to pop culture during the World War II era, the 1940s. This was the swing era. Big bands led by Glenn Miller, Duke Ellington, Benny Goodman. Perhaps you've heard of some of these guys. This music was filling the dance halls. And songs like, you gotta look this one up, Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, and In the Mood. These, of course, boosted spirits. You got patriotic songs like God Bless America, of course, by Kate Smith. These were also popular. And don't forget, during World War II, this was in the midst of the golden age of film. You got patriotic movies like Casablanca. If you've never heard of Mrs. Miniver, 1942, check that one out. That captures the wartime spirit. You got actors like Humphrey Bogart, Katharine Hepburn, and of course the Duke, John Wayne. They were household names. And of course you had animated characters like Bugs Bunny. And if you look back at some of those Bugs Bunny shorts, you'll realize they were pretty heavy into the propaganda supporting America in the war effort. Comic books were bursting onto the scene. Superheroes like Cap and Superman rose to prominence at this time. Cap first appears in 1941, and he famously punches Hitler on the cover of his debut comic. During this time, of course, they're inspiring patriotism, with many characters fighting Axis villains in the books. Comics provided escapism like the movies did. I know in my era, they were a huge inspiration for me, and a lot of my role models were the superheroes I read about in the comic books. Before the advent of TV, radio shows were all the rage. Families would gather around the radio for news updates, comedy programs, drama. Particular shows were The Shadow or The Adventures of Superman. These entertained listeners. And then who's heard of the Roosevelt Fireside Chats? These were set up to reassure the public during tough times. Because of the wartime rationing, fashion became more practical during the 40s. Women were wearing utility dresses and victory rolls in their hair. Men wore military-style clothing, even in civilian life, supporting the war effort. The Rosie the Riveter look became iconic, representing women who worked in factories. Victory gardens played a key role in the war effort. And of course, this inspires me as I pursue my journey to build my own homestead. Now, these victory gardens, they were incredibly successful. They contributed to the food supply. By 1944, nearly 20 million victory gardens were producing around 40% of all the vegetables consumed in the U.S. Can you believe that? What if we did that today? It seems to me like it would solve a lot of problems. Relief on commercial agriculture was big. These victory gardens actually helped to free up the commercially grown food to go to the military and for those overseas, ensuring that the troops and allies were well fed during the war. I love that the government was advocating for these victory gardens. They would actually distribute pamphlets and guides on how to plant and maintain gardens. The people, the government working together to grow nutritious food. Baseball, America's pastime, was hugely popular back then. You had stars like Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams serving in the military. It was at this time when the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League was formed. This inspired that movie, A League of Their Own, with Tom Hanks and Madonna. Okay, let's get the global perspective. What was going on in the rest of the world during this time? During this time, I would imagine this is the most Americans have ever been connected to the rest of the world. With the war going on, so many countries were involved. What happened during this time? So much. There's the Holocaust. This is one of the darkest chapters in human history. The genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of other groups. A huge blow to Germany was the Battle of Stalingrad. This battle between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union ended with a decisive Soviet victory. Meanwhile, on the Western Front, the Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy, France, to begin liberating Western Europe from Nazi control. This, following Germany's defeat in Stalingrad, put a nail in the coffin of Nazi Germany. Let's not forget that the Allied forces also had to launch a campaign against Benito Mussolini and other fascists like Hitler in Italy. And this event eventually led to the fall of the fascist dictator in Italy and ended his regime. All right, let's have some fun. Every episode, I'm going to be giving you trivia. Test your knowledge of the Marvel Universe and test your historical knowledge of reality. Here's how it works. I'm going to read you each trivia question in order without giving the answers, so you'll have time to think about each one. Then we'll go back and I'll reveal the answers. See how well you do. First, who gave Captain America his iconic shield made of vibranium in the comic books? Washington's famous Delaware River crossing led to which battle? Do you remember from our episode? In the MCU, what group does Captain America fight in an elevator? This is the Captain America Winter Soldier movie. True or false? George Washington's dentures were made of wood. True or false? This comes right out of our episode. George Washington freed all of his slaves during his lifetime. Who does Captain America pass his shield to at the end of Avengers Endgame? Another one right from our episode. What river did George Washington famously cross on Christmas night in 1776? Captain America's shield is primarily made of what rare metal? How fast does Captain America age compared to a regular human? And the last one, this is one of my favorite Captain America moments in the cinematic universe. He first delivers this iconic line in Captain America, the First Avenger, back in 2011. I can do this all day. He says this while fighting a bully in an alley before he gains his super soldier abilities. This line becomes a signature phrase, of course, symbolizing his resilience and determination. He calls back to this line in multiple Marvel Cinematic Universe films, but the best one, in my opinion, was in Avengers Endgame back in 2019. Who does he face when he delivers that iconic line, I can do this all day? Okay, let's see how you did. Who gave Cap his iconic shield made of vibranium? That'd be Howard Stark, Tony Stark's father. Washington's famous Delaware River crossing led to which battle? That would be the Battle of Trenton. In what group was it that Cap fights in the elevator in the film Captain America, the Winter Soldier? If you got Hydra agents as your answer, you got it right. True or false? George Washington's dentures were made of wood. That's false. They were actually made from materials like ivory, that comes from elephant tusks, lead, and human and animal teeth. Wow, maybe I'd prefer wood. True or false? George Washington freed all of his slaves during his lifetime. That's false. He arranged for their freedom in his will to take effect after his wife's death. Who does Captain America pass his shield to at the end of Avengers Endgame? Sam Wilson, who was the Falcon at the time. What river did George Washington famously cross on Christmas night in 1776? That'd be the Delaware River. Captain America's shield is primarily made of what rare metal? Vibranium. How fast does Captain America age compared to a regular human? He actually ages 1 year for every 10 years of a regular person. I didn't know that until I researched this just now. And for the last one, I can do this all day. That's the line that Cap delivers in Avengers Endgame when he faces his past self during the time heist. Classic moment. Audience cheered when I was in the theater to see that one. All right, this next segment is called Match That Quote. I'm going to give you 2 quotes. One is from George Washington. The other is from Captain America. You tell me who gave which quote. Here's the first quote. It is better to offer no excuse than a bad one. Here's the next quote. The price of freedom is high. It always has been. And it's a price I'm willing to pay. Okay, here they are again. Both quotes matched with the famous figure who delivered them. It is better to offer no excuse than a bad one. That was George Washington. It was Captain America who said, The price of freedom is high. It always has been, and it's a price I'm willing to pay. I'm going to end the episode by giving you something to think about. A Socratic question. First, let's say you're George Washington. In 1783, at the end of the Revolutionary War, Washington faced the Newburgh Conspiracy, where some of his officers, frustrated by Congress's inability to pay them, considered a military coup to take control of the government. Washington had to choose between using his influence to maintain order and protect the fragile new democracy, or risking alienating his loyal officers by siding with Congress. Here's the question I pose to you. If you were Washington, would you have given an impassioned speech to dissuade the officers as he did? Or would you have taken a different approach to address the grievances? What would your priorities have been? Maintaining loyalty, ensuring stability, or forcing Congress to act? What if you were Captain America? The Sokovia Accords were proposed after the Avengers caused unintended destruction during their missions. The Accords would have placed the Avengers under government oversight. Cap opposed the Accords, believing they would restrict freedom and moral responsibility, while others supported them to ensure accountability. If you were Cap, would you have signed the Sokovia Accords and accepted government oversight, or stood firm in your belief that the Avengers must remain independent? How would you justify your choice to the public and to your team? Thanks for joining me this episode, and I'm going to see you for the next one. The Agents of Change, Harriet Tubman and the Black Panther, two iconic figures that will compare and contrast. Leave a review if you haven't done so already, and if you want to contact me, there's links in the show notes. Use them. Now go out there and be a superhero. And remember, I love you.